Peggy Lee is a true artist. She worked hard at anything she did. So she would hone her voice and bring out the blues. So she always took all of her experiences when she was little and growing on up, to when she graduated high school in Wimbledon. And she used all that emotion and passion for her songs. And that's what made her voice.
I had occasion to, just before I came home from Arizona, to meet with a good friend who's pastor of a large church out of Apple Valley. And he told me he wanted to know where I was from when we were visiting. And I said, Wimbledon. Well, he said, I just did a sermon and used it as my text. Peggy Lee's song, Is That All There Is?
She didn't write the song, for example, Is That All There Is, which is really the only song that she's won a Grammy for. But the experiences that are within it are actually mirroring a lot of her life. It talks about a house burning down in the fire. She had that exact experience. And a lot of her songs that she has written, that reflects a lot of her life experiences. She talks about meeting somebody and falling in love. She talks about working and how hard she works in certain songs. So her lyrics are a reflection of where she came from and what she experienced in her life.
The story is that she was in a nightclub, and there was a lot of noise around her, just a huge amount of noise. And so she knew that she would not be able to sing loud enough to get everyone's attention. So she started singing very softly and very that Peggy Lee style. And the longer she sang, the more it got very, very, very quiet. And so that was her trademark.
I moved to Wimbledon in 1990, and Myrna Bultema was my neighbor. And Myrna Bultema's project was Peggy Lee. She loved Peggy Lee. So for years and years, she'd carry around this cardboard figurine of Peggy Lee. Okay, so she'd have the old museum, the Depot Museum, and it was, there was nothing heated in there, but she'd bring people over there and they'd take pictures with Peggy Lee, with her, her little figurine of Peggy Lee. And so Myrna was always like, Peggy Lee, she's gonna make Wimbledon this big thing, Peggy Lee. So Myrna Bultema introduced me to Peggy Lee, and so everything's past, from what we've done to now, it's all Myrna's dream, so.
When Myrna she wanted to do this with Peggy Lee in the Midland Depot, she thought it would bring a lot to Wimbledon, and it has. And she also gave money to get it started. And I saw the whole part when they were tearing it apart, and because my husband and Carol were working there, and a lot of people were doing a lot of volunteer work, and it was really interesting.
Well, I guess it was back in probably, I think, 2000, right in that area. My sister, my mother, and my brother came to Jamestown and Wimbledon to talk about the possibility of the museum. My first real experience with it was when we came in 2012 for the grand opening. We came and I got to meet all the people, the committee members that were involved in setting the museum up, and then seeing the museum for the first time, and the community of Wimbledon. And we've tried to make it now, my wife and I have tried to make it a yearly thing where we come back every year. As you probably remember, the museum opened on May 26th, which is actually Peggy Lee's birthday. She would have been 95 this year, and we're trying to honor her a little bit by coming back every year to visit the museum on her birthday and volunteer at the museum. So
I started out being the liaison between the Depot Committee and the museum board. And then it evolved that Carol Peterson took a break for a time as being chairman, and then I was chairman for a bit.
My role in this whole process was making Myrna Bultema's dream come true. That was my role. And I was going to make sure everybody else made sure that we got it done. I was basically the coordinator between the federal and the state and the local, and then obviously now I'm the president of the Depot Restoration Committee.
It's a commercial business. Mr. Frank Bull and his sidekick, they had a dream that they'd like to have a railroad go from Winnipeg to Galveston, Texas, which is 1,500 miles of railroad, and it would go right through Wimbledon. Phase 1 got done. They started in 1912 in Edgeley and ended up in Wimbledon, or in Jamestown. Phase 2 in 1913 went from Jamestown to Wimbledon, and the first railroad ended up in Wimbledon in like September or October of 1913. Why the railroad never continued on is Mr. Ismay, that owned the White Star Line that built the Titanic, which sunk in 1912, was going to invest $2 million in this railroad. The Friday before, World War I broke out. The money never got transferred. The money went to the war effort in Europe, and that was the end of the funding. It ended up with 76 miles of railroad. Fraser elevator to Edgeley.
I had occasion to ride it from here to Jamestown. So I got on the Midland Continental here, rode it to Jamestown, then get on that Galloping Goose and rode that up to Edmonds. Look at all the stops that the railroad made. We can't imagine that today, because at that time, that was one of the major ways of transportation from one place to another. See, when the railroad first started in 1913, why, there weren't very few cars. I think it's important to history because the original intent was to build a north-south railroad, which would have been the only north-south railroad from Winnipeg to Galveston, Texas. And if we had that today, think of the crossroads of transportation and railroads that would be using that line. It'd be unbelievable.
We haven't had the takeoff moment for Peggy Lee Museum and the Depot, but it will happen, and people will come to Wimbledon.
There's been a lot of wonderful things done there, like a lot of things given to the museum through the railroad, and a lot of things given through the Peggy Lee family.
It could be huge, and someday it'll catch on, and it really will be huge, but it's coming. What Peggy Lee music has become to me now is all of the things that, it just wraps up everything that we've done with the project, so we have the people. Now we have the real people, even though it's not Peggy Lee, it's a lot of real people involved in that.
It just proves that, Wimbledon can be whatever they want to be. And if we embrace the project, I think it could be huge.
She wasn't really Peggy Lee to us. She was Mama Peggy. As far as what her music means to me, it means it's sort of a reflection of who my grandmother was, where she came from and what she became, and a great source of pride. And I'm lucky that we have wonderful music recorded to listen to and keep remembering her.
It shows that Wimbledon had some class.
All right.
Yep.
Well, I think we're good. That was awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much.